Stop working, start creating. Everyone tells you to grind harder, hustle longer, and outwork everyone else. But here's the truth, all that busy work won't make you great. Hunter S. Thompson, Charles Bukowski, Friedrich Nietzsche, they weren't grinding spreadsheets or chasing productivity hacks. They were creating in chaos, in frenzy, in surrender. And here's the paradox, the less you force, the more breakthroughs you find. Genius doesn't come from work, it comes from creating. If you are building a company or chasing what your soul sings, you know this cycle. You're told to follow productivity hacks. You fill your days with busy work. You end each night exhausted, only to start the cycle all over again. But when the weekend comes and someone asks you, what did you experience this week? You have nothing to say. No memory, no story, no moment that nourished your soul. That's the lie of the grind. You worked, but you didn't live. You produced, but you didn't create. You optimized, but you didn't experience. And honestly, half the productivity hacks floating around could be replaced with one good nap. But naps don't sell books or Notion templates. So here we are. Look at Thompson, one of the most prolific writers of his time, or Bukowski, the so called drunk poet of Los Angeles. You probably picture chaos, guns, bars, hangovers, heartbreak. But here's the truth, beneath the madness was relentless discipline. Thompson's collected letters alone could fill shelves. Bukowski wrote every single day, sending out poem after poem, story after story. Yes, they had one advantage. One Chronicle article could pay Thompson's San Francisco rent for 6 months. That gave him breathing room. But that breathing room wasn't an excuse to drift. It became fuel for endless output. And here's the point for you, they weren't role models for their vices. They were proof that creativity thrives when you cut out the grind. Their genius came from intensity, not busyness. The less they forced, the more they created. And here's the contrast. Men like Thompson and Bukowski could drink themselves into genius. Women didn't have that luxury. Women had to outwork, outlast, and still create in systems stacked against them. Take Virginia Woolf. She wrote with piercing clarity about the need for a room of one's own because for women, creative space wasn't a given, it was a fight. Toni Morrison wrote her novels at 4 a.m. before going to her day job and raising her children. That's its own kind of madness and its own kind of genius. Nietzsche, too. People forget Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Book 1, was written in just 10 days. But those 10 days came after years of illness, heartbreak, rejection. And here's the funny detail, the book also came right after he got rejected by a woman, which just goes to show. Some people write sad songs, Nietzsche wrote Zarathustra. Talk about overreacting productively. But seriously, this wasn't random. It was the release of years of pressure into one manic surge. And here's the lesson for you, your magnum opus won't be born from the grind. It will come when years of saturation meet that one moment of surrender. As you see, this pattern is everywhere. Tolkien wrote The Lord of Rings after being exposed to the atrocities of World War I. It just poured out of him. Years of trauma and observation suddenly became a masterpiece. And I felt versions of this myself. Back when I was in deep software implementation work, I would hit walls trying to configure solutions to messy business problems. I would try again and again and again, sometimes obsessively, and nothing worked. But when I finally paused, walked away, and came back the next day with a fresh mind, suddenly the solution was obvious. It wasn't more grinding that unlocked it, it was surrender. This hit me even harder in my big 4 years. That culture was grind incarnate. Deliverables were needed yesterday. You were working together with your team on a project to make it a success, but also competing with the rest of the people at your level because your performance was always tied to and compared with others. This constant grind squeezed output out of you, but rarely inspiration. The truth is, breakthroughs always came when I stopped forcing and allowed clarity to emerge. So, what's the pattern? Genius lives at the intersection of three forces. One is radical surrender, not giving up, not checking out. Radical surrender means having the patience and strength to pause, to step back before you waste years forcing solutions that are aligned with your soul. Second, contrast maxing. Push into deep work, then let yourself release. Thompson partied, then wrote 5,000 words, word letters at dawn. Bukowski drank, then hammered the typewriter. Nietzsche hiked the Alps, then wrote in frenzy. Woolf carved out space. Morrison wrote before dawn. Your productivity isn't linear, it's surrender and intensity, not balance. And let's be honest, you don't need balance. You need a life that doesn't feel like a badge reward. Third, conversations. Find peers who challenge you, who sharpen you. Goethe, Kierkegaard, Nietzsche all did this. You need your version of the salon, the symposium, the late night debate. That's where your ideas sharpen and multiply. You've been told to grind harder, but grinding harder isn't the answer. Grind is repetition without soul. Genius is intensity that produces timeless work. The paradox is simple. The less you force, the more you create what lasts. The real challenge isn't to work harder. The real challenge is to align harder with your nature, your dharma, your truth. Because nobody's obituary ever said she cleared her inbox twice a day without fail. So stop measuring your week by how many emails you send or how many hours you logged. Measure it by the one experience, the one insight, the one spark that could carry you forward for years. And stop comparing yourself to everyone else. We are all walking contradictions, so embrace it anyway. That's where your real genius lives. And that's how Zarathustra was born in 10 days. That's how Thompson and Bukowski wrote their way into history. That's how Woolf demanded her room. That's how Morrison created her words. And that's how you will find your own fire. Genius isn't balance. It isn't grind. It isn't filling your calendar with busy work. Genius is collusion of surrender and intensity. And here's the truth. Nietzsche was a contradiction. Thompson was a contradiction. Bukowski was a contradiction. Tolkien was a contradiction. So were Virginia Woolf and Toni Morrison. Woolf demanded space in a world that gave her none. Morrison woke before dawn to write, holding her genius in cracks of an impossible schedule. From those contradictions, their best work poured out. So don't wait until you're consistent or perfect. You will never be. You are a walking contradiction, and that's what exactly what makes you powerful. The question is, will you embrace it or keep forcing yourself into someone else's mold?